and today we're going through a 2014 thriller drama movie called Addicted. The premiering scene of the movie shows a woman named Zoe Reynard getting out of her car into a building. She walks to a doctor's office. Upon entering, she meets Dr. Marcella Spencer, her shrink, who receives her warmly. After settling down with Marcella, Zoe narrates her experience as an addict. As she talks, there's a flashback to 6 months earlier. In the flashback, Zoe is seen with her husband, Jason, her kids, and her mother playing a fun game. That same night, Zoe and her husband engage in romance. After finishing their business, Zoe asks her husband to go for one more. Unfortunately for her, Jason goes to sleep. Poor Jason has had the life drained out of him. Zoe gets down from the bed and finishes her business as she watches movies. The next morning, Zoe gets to her workplace looking dashing as usual. She settles down in her office as her assistant, Brina, fills her in on the new art exhibit Quentin Canosa, a prominent contemporary artist, was hosting with them. Zoe is astonished at Canosa's work and she doesn't hide it. She tells Brina she'd work towards licensing Canosa's work if he'd allow her, and Brina cheer her on. That same day, Zoe is seen at an art exhibit. She walks toward Quentin Canosa's space and stares at one of his works. Just then, a man comes by to stare at the same art piece. Zoe has a fallout with the man as she thinks he's just another bozo who just stares at artworks for the love of it. However, this wasn't the case, as another man passes by and commends the man for his artwork, also calling him Quentin Canosa. This shocks Zoe as she apologizes immediately and introduces herself to the French painter. After the necessary introductions, Zoe discusses business with Canosa. Canosa, however, actively tempts Zoe as he touches her gently while she talks. Zoe notices and cuts out the act so they can focus more on business. Canosa plays along as he listens to her advertise her company, which represents contemporary artists. Canosa tempts Zoe yet again, and this time, it works. He invites her to his studio the next Monday, which she accepts immediately. Now back in reality, Zoe lets Marcella know how young and excited Canosa made her feel. Zoe tells her therapist that she really was into Canosa, and again we're back into the flashback. In the flashback, Zoe is stood up by her husband after preparing a very dinner with her best clothes on. She acts like she understands him working late when, in reality, she's just as disappointed as we are. Zoe walks out of the house, telling her mother she was going to the store while wearing a $1,000 dress. As we know it, Zoe gets her boots to a bar as she sits down and watches a couple by a corner having a good time. Just then, her mother calls her and she gets to a corner to pick up the call. Her mother is suspicious at first but acts none the wiser. She tells her daughter to get her some cookies on her way back. Later that night, Jason gets back home and meets his wife. As usual, he gets into the shower and they come closer. Again, Zoe wants more. However, Jason is asleep. Just as she's about to sleep, she imagines Canosa telling her she looked beautiful in her sleep. Before she could finish her dream, her daughter woke her up. Zoe gets downstairs and enjoys the breakfast her husband made for her. Now back in reality, Zoe tells her therapist that Jason's been her first and only love. The therapist's surprised and listens to Zoe as she continues her narration after talking about how she should have been more honest with Jason. Now back into the flashback, Zoe finds her way to Canosa's house. She knocks on his door and marvels at his physique. Then, they get down to the business of the day with Zoe trying not to break character. After talking about business for a while, Zoe decides to leave before she does something stupid. If only she'd gone with her gut. Before Zoe leaves, Canosa calls her back and tells her she's the only contractor he'd ever signed with. He then tells her that he wants to paint her so he'd fantasize about her when she's not beside him. This excites Zoe as Canosa moves too close for comfort. As reality draws near, Zoe turns back from the door and allows Canosa to come closer to her. After their activity, Zoe returns back to her office with her hair a bit messed up. She's seen smiling as she recounts her morning with Canosa. She's not allowed to finish her fantasy as her assistant breaks into her office. She tells him to keep their client waiting so she can fantasize about Canosa the more. Eventually, Zoe cuts off all her work that day and gets out of the office, much to the disapproval of Brina. Now back in the house, Zoe's seen in the shower. Well, after her shower, she's in front of her mirror imagining Canosa around her again. Just then, her boy, Peter, and her mother come into her room to tell her about their day. After telling her mother she's not feeling too well, Zoe's given the liberty to rest for the day. On another day, Zoe's shown her reservation with one of the big business owners in town as she tears up the contract she signed with Canosa. She writes to Canosa that she couldn't do the bad thing with him anymore and goes to break the bad news to him at his place. Seriously, Zoe. Upon getting to Canosa's place, Zoe meets Canosa's neighbor who tells her Canosa's not home. Eventually, she finds out Canosa has been yapping about her to his very beautiful neighbor. The neighbor introduces herself as Diamond and warns Zoe that Canosa can be very sensitive. Zoe drops the letter at his entrance and meets Canosa outside again. After pretending to be over him, Canosa grabs her and kisses her. Just then, Canosa invites her to see some art and blindfolds her. Canosa drives Zoe to an abandoned building and removes the blindfold. Zoe is shown one of the most beautiful graffiti art in her life. After getting to know Canosa's story, she finds out how bad his life was. She watches Canosa cry over his deadbeat mother and kisses him again. That night, Zoe rushes to meet Mr. Balthazar as he's about to leave the diner they reserved for their business talk. She convinces him to reschedule their meeting after lying about her daughter being sick the whole time. Now back in reality, Zoe writhes in pain as she tells her therapist about the pain she feels, cheating on Jason. She then leaves the therapist's office after realizing time was already gone. Now back in the flashback, Canosa paints Zoe as she poses for him. Just as Canosa's about to change her pose, she comes close to him yet again. After finishing their business, Zoe wakes up to find out Canosa's not home. She takes a walk around his house and sees former paintings of another woman by the side. Just as she checks out the photos, Canosa comes in and chats with her about the origin of the paintings. Seeing as they're not hers, Zoe gets jealous. Canosa tries to talk her back into staying with him as he tells her she belongs with him. Zoe leaves anyway and gets to her house. There, she finds out she missed her son's last game of the season. This doesn't sit well with Peter as he ignores her. Just then, her daughter finds some pain in her hair and cleans it off. Zoe acts like she is tired of work as she keeps thinking about Canosa. Now back in reality, Zoe's therapist, Marcella, tells Zoe that she's habitual to the romance and that's why she couldn't get Canosa out of her head. Zoe's skeptical at first but soon reasons with Marcella as she explains how one can be obsessive about love. Zoe freaks out on her therapist as she's advised to talk to Jason about it. One night, Zoe's at home washing dishes as Canosa sends her a text on her new phone. As she ignores her text, Jason walks in and teases her about having a new boyfriend as Canosa sends her another text. Little did he know he was right. Jason sits with his wife in the kitchen and Zoe talks to him about the both of them seeing a therapist about their love life. Stupid Jason shows his disapproval of his wife's advice. A disappointed Zoe takes a walk and gets back to Canosa for some to have more love. After finishing their business for the night, Canosa tells Zoe to leave her husband so he could be with her. Zoe acts unruly and walks downstairs. Just as she's about to leave, she sees that Canosa painted himself into the painting meant for her. Shoot walks out with tears in her eyes. Now back in reality, Zoe complains about how Canosa was being unfair to her, telling her to leave her husband for him. She gets back to the flashback as she narrates how she had another affair with a different man in the bar she was in one night. Now back in reality, she explains to her therapist that she enjoyed every moment of her time with the man as Marcella makes her know she'd need to remember her past so she understands herself better. Apparently, Zoe couldn't remember her life before she was 10 years old. Or maybe she doesn't want to. Zoe leaves shortly afterward as we see her with the guy from the bar doing romance, in her office. Thankfully, Brina gets her back to reality as she knocks on her office door. Upon entering, Brina makes her know their company wasn't doing well that quarter. This doesn't faze Zoe as she's back at Canosa's. After knocking for a little while, she finds out Canosa was getting down with Diamond. She gets jealous, acts up, and leaves for the other man's house. They enjoy themselves together as the scene shifts into Zoe tucking her kids in for the night and going out for the night as usual. Upon getting to a private club with her new buddy, they witness the ugliest things go down there. You don't even want to imagine what's there. After finishing her business, Zoe gets home and cleans off her lipstick before entering the house. She sneaks into the house and meets Jason on the couch who questions her about where she's been going ever since. Zoe acts defensive and Jason asks her what she wants from him. She says she wants more time with him but as we know it, Jason acts very stupid and is hard-headed once again. He doesn't listen to his wife again and acts like everything's fine. Eventually, Zoe doesn't get what she wants and leaves for her work again. This time, she finds out how bad things are at work. She probably should have kept an eye out for work. Brina lets her in on the reality of what their company was facing and cheers her boss and friend back to life. Zoe thinks for a bit and gets to Canosa's place again to get his signature on a contract. As they're about to get down to business, someone knocks on the door. Zoe goes to hide and thankfully so. The person at the door was her husband Jason. Zoe watches from the closet as Jason admires Canosa's paintings. Her soul almost moves out of her body when Jason nearly uncovers a painting with her in it. Thankfully, Jason's assistant cuts in, telling Jason they had to go. Canosa was disappointed as he wanted Jason to see the painting. As Jason takes his leave, Zoe comes out of her hiding place. Now back at home, her other guy calls her and she cuts the call. Zoe gets down to see her people going out for a movie. They leave her behind for the first time ever. This shocks Zoe as she explains it to her therapist. Marcella then presses her to try and remember her past so they could move forward. As you'd know, scared little Zoe acts defensively again and argues with her therapist. Afterward, Zoe leaves to get home and sees her other guy delivering a package to her doorstep. She quickly grabs the package from her mother. Upon opening it, she finds out it's one of her pieces of clothing. She rushes inside her house and sees her husband with a sculpture from Canossa. Aware of what's happening, Zoe feels sick to her stomach and runs to the bathroom to belch or something. Jason goes to soothe his wife. Later that night, Zoe pays Canossa a visit yet again. This time, her new lover is there. She tries to break up with Canossa and her new lover. However, things don't go as planned as Canossa knocks out Zoe's new lover and goes AWOL on Zoe. Zoe throws some glass on the floor, causing Canossa to have a wound on the foot. She runs further into Canossa's apartment and Canossa follows suit, acting like a lunatic all the way. Thankfully, before Canossa could harm Zoe, Jason appears from behind and knocks out Canossa. Zoe's just as shocked as we are as she follows her husband downstairs, begging him to forgive and understand her. Jason acts uninterested, shunning his wife's every attempt to apologize to him. Zoe realizes she's done with her husband and tries to finish herself off. A car hits her and Jason's sorry for his actions. In the next scene, Jason is seen sympathizing with his family. Diamond takes care of Canossa and Brina clears out Zoe's office. Thankfully, Zoe didn't die as we see her in the hospital. Later on, Zoe's discharged and she meets her family. Jason still acts a bit annoyed at her and rightfully so. She cheated on him with 2 creeps. By nightfall, Jason packs some bags and puts them in the car. The next day, Brina pays Zoe a visit to get her back to work. Jason gets the kids back home and meets his mother-in-law. She explains things better to Jason, advising him to give Zoe a second chance at life. Up next, Zoe attends real therapy, this time with Marcella. She explains to the group that she was assaulted at 10 years old by 3 boys. Now we know why she's like that. As she explains to the group, Jason does the most romantic thing for the first time and attends therapy with his wife and friend. The whole crowd could do nothing but clap for both of them. The movie ends as Zoe kisses her husband with a gallon of tears in her eyes. Seems like forgiveness really does work. Thanks for watching, guys.